Okay. All right. So we're back in Revelation. Today we're going to be looking at Revelation chapter 6. Particularly, we'll probably just get through the four horsemen of the apocalypse. We'll look into those, what that's all about. But to really get a full understanding of it, we need to remember our context of what we've been dealing with. So let's pull it back a little bit. The visions of John in this section begin in chapter 4. Remember chapter 1, he has the vision of Christ holding the stars and walking among the lampstands. And then in 2 and 3, he gives words of encouragement and conviction and just speaks to the churches, the 7 churches, and dealing with their struggles and challenges that they're facing, whether persecution, false teaching, apostasy, even just coldness of heart and broken fellowship. But he speaks to them. And then in chapter 4, he now sees the vision of God on his throne. And then the tension of the scene begins in chapter 5. Let's review that very quickly here. In chapter 5, he sees in the right hand of the one seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And that's the first tension now, as the question is, who is worthy to open the scroll? And no one is found worthy in heaven or earth until the Lion of the tribe of Judah comes, and who is a lamb standing. But the question is, what is that scroll? And this sealed scroll, what is going on here? And what does it mean to open that scroll? Do you remember? We talked a little bit about that, I think, last time. What's the scroll all about?
The scroll was the one that Daniel had.
Yeah. And what was the scroll from Daniel, if you remember? What that was about?
Extensive list.
Say that one more time.
Yeah, it's an extensive list or something.
An extensive list.
Uh-huh.
Perhaps something, but Daniel's scroll, that he was told to seal it up, if you remember. And the scroll, we noticed it was written with on both sides of the scroll. And what kind of a document is this that needs to be opened up?
It's like
Go ahead, Rob.
a contract.
Yeah, it's like a contract or a will.
Covenant.
Yeah, a covenant. But basically, the opening of it is now it's being applied. So you have a will, for example, and it would be written on both sides, and then it would be rolled up and sealed, and it would not be opened until the day when the person who wrote the will dies, and then those who are waiting for their inheritance will now open the scroll and read the will, and this is what's happening. So Daniel is given this scroll, but he's told to seal it up because it's not yet for him. He has to wait. He's talking about things that are distant in the future. So John now sees this vision of this one on the throne with the scroll that's sealed. And the question is it time now to break the seals and open the scroll? Which means, is it time for us to get our inheritance, for things to be made right, for there to be justice and deliverance? That's really the hope of this. Notice again that John is weeping loudly because the scroll, no one was found worthy. So the scroll is clearly presented to us as something, sorry about that John is longing to be opened. And that the people, you have to keep that in mind. This is not a scroll of horrors that we would want to keep shut. It is a scroll that for John, this is his hope that he's longing for.
What is the significance of it being written on both sides?
Yeah, that's kind of a reference. We went through that with Ezekiel, I think, didn't we? And that's typically on both sides, they would have on one side was sort of the details, and the other side, if I'm not mistaken, was sort of a summary of it. So the way it was a classic document of that time for these kind of contracts and wills. So again, to open them up is now to read it and bring it to pass. So the scroll is always there, ready to go, but now we're waiting. So this is the John is longing for this return, and no one has the authority to open that scroll and to read it. No one can bring it about until the Lamb on the throne appears, and he can do this. He's worthy to open the scrolls. And notice again the singing of songs as feel the excitement. He's opening the scroll. He's breaking the seal. You have to read it with that kind of anticipation. What you're about to see might be some terrifying images, but for John and for the readers, they're not terrifying. They are thrilling for them. They cannot wait for these things to happen because this scroll means something here. Worthy is the Lamb to receive all power and glory and blessing and so forth. And that's where we left it off last time. So now we're going to take a look at the scroll. Now, the first part is this: there are 7 seals. So each, again, the whole 7 business, you remember, this is God's number. And so each seal will unfold a promise or a development of a promise leading up to the conclusion. So let's take a look, and we're going to read the first 4 as a whole, and then we're going to go back and reflect a little bit about what in the world we're looking at here. So let's get started with that. Raymond, would you mind reading for us our first verses 1 to 8 in Revelation 6?
Now watch when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a loud voice, or with a voice like thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow and a crown, and was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. When he opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that the people would slay one another, and he was given a great sword. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." When they had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over the 4th of the earth to kill with sword and with famine, with pestilence and wild beasts of the earth.
Okay, great. All right, so you'll notice a pattern. First, did you notice there's a similar pattern with each of these seals of how things go? The Lamb, it begins with the Lamb opening one of the seals. And then what's the next thing that happens after the Lamb opens the seals?
A white horse and rider came out.
Before the
Voice
horse comes,
like
what
thunder.
happens? A voice,
Voice like thunder.
yeah, whose voice?
For
The
one of the
Lord.
4 living creatures.
Okay, so you have the Lamb opens the seal,
Mhm.
and one of the 4 living creatures says with a loud voice like thunder, "Come," right? And then what
Yes.
happens?
Then a white horse.
A horse appears. First a white horse, then a bright
Yeah.
red horse,
Then a black.
and then a pale horse. So you have 4 horses here. All right, so the first thing we want to look at is what are these 4 horses about here? It seems very strange to us, but John is making a reference to something that the Jews and the Christians who understood their Old Testament would have known about. He's referencing back to Zechariah chapter 1, where we have a scene of 4 horses. And that scene will give you some sense of the context for this one here. So let's go to Zechariah chapter 1 and read a little bit about these 4 horses and what they're about. Okay. All right, so here's a vision of a horseman. Let's see what we got here. The Lord begins, Zechariah 1 begins with the Lord calling the people to return. It's during the second year of Darius. Do you know what who Darius was?
Darius the Mede.
This is the key.
Yeah, he was king of the Medes or the Persians. So this is after the fall of the Babylonians. So the Babylonians took them into exile in Daniel's time, if you remember, and then the Persians conquered them, and it was Darius who was the one who was sort of in charge of that part of it. And that brings a turning point in their history. Now, the exile, the torment of the Babylonians is sort of turned now, and there's a more hopeful time under the Persians as they're more tolerant, and they will call for the rebuilding of the temple and the rebuilding of Jerusalem. So this is sort of the beginning, and the God's calling them to return from their evil ways. But right now it's about 537 BC, and they've now been like 70 years just about in exile, and it's just a discouraging time for them. And he has a vision, Zechariah does. Let's read that vision. Let's see. Rob, would you get this for us here, 7 down to 17?
Okay. On the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shabbat, in the second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, son of Iddo, saying, I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the glen, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. Then I said, what are these, my Lord? And the angel who talked with me said to me, I will show you what they are. So the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered, these are they whom the Lord has sent to patrol the earth. And they answered the angel of the Lord who was standing among the myrtle trees and said, we have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth remains at rest. Then the angel of the Lord said, O Lord of hosts, how long will you have no mercy on Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, against which you have been angry these 70 years? And the Lord answered gracious and comforting words to the angel who talked with him. So the angel who talked with me said to me, cry out, thus says the Lord of hosts, I am exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion, and I am exceedingly angry with the nations that are at ease. For while I was angry but a little, they furthered the disaster. Therefore, thus says the Lord, I have returned to Jerusalem with mercy. My house shall be built in it, declares the Lord of hosts, and the measuring line shall be stretched out over Jerusalem. Cry out again, thus says the Lord of hosts, my cities shall again overflow with prosperity, and the Lord will again comfort Zion and again choose Jerusalem.
So Zechariah has a vision in the night, and he sees a man riding on a horse, and then he sees several different color horses, and they're standing among the myrtle trees. It's a very interesting scene because he tells us in this passage what these horses are. Did you catch that in I think it was verse 10? What's their job?
Patrol the earth.
Yeah, they're patrolling the earth. What does that mean to patrol the earth?
Guard.
Yeah.
To guard, they're going, yeah, they're going about to see how things are going and to report back. They're going on their patrol, like you have patrolmen. They do their duties. They just kind of keep and check a watch on things and report how things are going. And when they come back, what's their report of how things are going?
They're at rest.
All the earth remains at rest. Okay. Now, when the angel says this, he says, you notice the angel of the Lord, his response to the patrolman. So the horses come back. By the way, they're among the myrtles, which is an interesting idea, is that they're sort of a hidden patrol, kind of like horses in the forest. You can't really see them. They're sort of kind of secretly going about doing their work and then kind of reporting back. That's sort of that they're sort of among the trees in the glen. So they're not out in the open field, easily seen. They're in the forest, doing their watching and so forth. So they come back sort of secretly patrolling the earth. They come back saying all is at rest. But the angel of the Lord, they answered, and the angel of the Lord responds to them. And what's his response to these patrolmen? Is he
Thank
happy
you.
about this?
How
Go ahead.
long will you have no mercy on Jerusalem and the
Yeah.
cities of Judah?
Yeah. So he is not happy that the earth is at rest.
Mm.
The idea is that the whole earth is at rest, but God's people are in exile and are suffering. But everyone else is doing great.
Right.
That's distressing. That's distressing. It's kind of like, you can imagine the distress of, I don't know, the Jews in the concentration camps in Germany in the 1930s before World War II breaks out. Their only hope is that there's going to be a war to get them free, because they are suffering greatly. But hey, all Germany's at rest, so don't worry about it. Everyone's asleep, everyone's peaceful, but we're not. We're suffering. And so that's the picture here, is all the earth is at peace. Everyone's doing great, except God's people are still without a home, destitute, in exile. And how long are you going to let this go on?
Mm.
The Lord promises, I will take care of this. That he is, in fact, even though the world's at rest, how is the Lord toward the world? In verse 15,
Angry.
he is angry,
The
exceedingly
nations.
angry with the nations, and he's exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem. So even though everything seems at peace, the Lord's at the tipping point right now with fury toward the nations, and is very exceedingly jealous for Jerusalem. So that's where Zechariah wants. But then he comes back to these horses at the end of the book. And I want to come to that vision now. So Ezekiel, now he has a vision of 4 chariots. This is 6:1-8. Let's see. Elizabeth, would you read that for us?
Sure. Again, I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, 4 chariots came out between 2 mountains. And the mountains were mountains of bronze. The first chariot had red horses, the second black horses, the third white horses, and the fourth chariot dappled horses, all of them strong. Then I answered and said to the angel who talked with me, "What are these, my lord?" And the angel answered and said to me, "These are going out to the 4 winds of heaven after presenting themselves before the Lord of all the earth. The chariot with the black horses goes toward the north country. The white ones go after them, and the dappled ones go toward the south country. When the strong horses came out, they were impatient to go and patrol the earth. And he said, 'Go, patrol the earth.' So they patrolled the earth. Then he cried to me, 'Behold, those who go toward the north country have set my spirit at rest in the north country.'"
So he has, you can see kind of similarities here, right? There's he has now a vision of 4 chariots, and each of those chariots has different color horses. So what are the 4 chariots according to Zechariah's vision? We're looking at verse 2 and 3 here.
Red, black, white, and dappled. which I'm
Okay,
not
red,
sure
black,
what that
white,
is.
and dappled. And in John's vision, what color were they?
Red,
Red, black,
black, pale,
pale,
and
And
white.
white.
That's right.
white.
Okay. And so very similar to this vision here. Now in Zechariah's vision, he sees that they're being sent out into all the earth. And these are war chariots, these strong horses carrying these chariots. And we find that the black horses and the white ones that are going after them are going north, and the dappled ones are going to the south country. You know what the north country is and the south country, and why no east and west country? Do you know why that is?
Well,
With
the
Judah.
west is the Mediterranean, isn't it?
Yes, the west is the
That's
Mediterranean
AC.
Sea, and what's the east?
The
Persia,
desert.
Persia.
Persia.
East is the desert. The desert. There's no one goes through there. So in order to get to Persia or Babylonia, any of those places, you go north. And what's down south?
Egypt.
Egypt is down
Egypt.
south. So these are the great powers. There was always the case. The powers that tormented God's people were from the north and from the south. They always came from the north. Even when the Romans came and took them over, they came from the north. They didn't go by the sea. They came down from the north. And that when the Egyptians had the power, they would come up from the south. And so these chariots are now bringing to them, looks like bringing to them some trouble here. But it goes along with this, the world's at peace now, and God will not have that. God will not have the world at peace in their wickedness and his people suffering for long. And so he sends forth the chariots now to bring the judgment, the trouble that they deserve. So that's what we're looking at now in Revelation 6, is these, John has a vision. First thing is we see the first calling forth of these horses. He doesn't describe them as chariots, but as the focus is on the horse and the color. And let's take a look at what they could possibly mean here. So the first one, let's read it one more time. That first seal broken and the first horse that comes forth. Let's see. Julia, would you read chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 one more time for us?
Now I watch when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer.
Okay. Now the first question is this. It was one of the 4 living creatures that cried out, said, "Come." Which creature was it? What are the 4 living creatures?
The
The lion,
It was the lion, and what was it again? The ox, someone
The
said?
ox.
Yes. Man,
Man.
And the eagle.
it's like a
And the
man.
eagle.
the eagle,
That's the exact order that they're given to us. The first living creature is a lion, or had the face of a lion. The second of an ox. The third was a man. The fourth was an eagle. And you'll notice in this that each paragraph begins with one of the 4 living creatures, and then it's the second living creature, the third living creature, and the fourth living creature. So this is the first living creature that says, "Come." And which one was the first living creature again?
Lion.
The lion.
The lion. All right, the lion is the one who cries out, "Come." All right. And he speaks with a voice like thunder.
Mhm.
And let's take a look at a passage of referencing the thundering voice. That's Psalm 18, 6 to 19. This is an interesting picture here of this. So Bob Thomas, would you read that for us here? If you can see that, okay?
Yeah.
I'll make it bigger and then I'll pull it down when you get a little closer to it.
See, throw these on, it'll help.
Okay.
In my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. From his temple, he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundation also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils, and devouring fire from his mouth, glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, thick clouds dark with water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coal of fire broke through his clouds. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and he sent out his arrows and scattered them. He flashed forth lightning and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He sent from on high. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me, and they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you see the similarities to those verses that we just read of the four living creatures cried out with a loud voice like thunder, come, and behold, a white horse. And the rider had a bow and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. And you see this scene here. There's a mention of the Lord's bow and his arrows flying from him, his voice, the Lord thundering in the heavens from his voice. He's coming in fury. He's even riding a cherub, which is one of these living creatures. These are cherubim. So he's doing all of this. Why is he doing it? And that's the important part, is to get what is moving him to such anger and fury and ready to just conquer and take over. What's moving him?
To save one that he loves.
Exactly right. In my distress, I called upon the Lord, my God, for help. And he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. I mean, to get a sense of this, did you see the videos, by the way, of the parents of the school children trying to get into the school?
Yes.
I saw this. And the police are, I don't know if they handled it well or not, but the police are trying to keep them back, and the parents are just furious, and they're ready to run in there and rescue their kids with a fury for them. I mean, that's in a sense here, they hear the distress of their children. They can hear it crying out to them. And any mother knows this, and any father knows this. You hear your child's in danger, and you move heaven and earth, and woe to anybody who gets in your way. And that's kind of the scene here, is the Lord looking, hearing the cry of distress. So his vengeance, his justice that he's bringing is very personal. And you're going to see this throughout the book of Revelation, that God's wrath that comes against the nations is really, and it's really defined by his love. And when he sees those he loves in distress, woe to those who are causing it. That it's very personal. And I think I'm going to keep coming back to that theme. But Revelation, the way it presents God and his wrath, is not as this objective judge who sits on the stand, perfectly objective. Let me hear the evidence and I'll come away with a reasonable verdict. That's not the way God judges. He judges as a father judges, with a passion and a fury. It's very personal. And so when he sees the evil committed against his children, he will not stand for that for long. And he comes with a fury. And you really, when you see the heat from this is a sign, wow, how he loves us, how he cares for his people. It's hard sometimes for us to catch that, but what would any of those parents have done if they could have gotten their hands on that shooter? Right?
We killed him.
There would be no mercy, would there? No understanding, no mercy, just pure wrath. Not because they hate this kid, but because they love their child. That's why.
Yes.
Okay, you have to get that concept down. So when this scene of Revelation comes with this thundering voice, come, and it's speaking to a world that is at peace, and everyone's fine. Everyone's doing great. The Romans, the Jews, they're all the enemies of God's people are at peace. And God's people are suffering, including John, who's on the island of Patmos, and his writers who he's sharing in their tribulation. And so now he sees this seal being opened, the first is this voice, come. And what's the first thing that happens? The first act of God's justice and vengeance is he sends forth a white horse. What's the meaning? Why a white horse? This is a little tricky because white has a number of different meanings. In some contexts, white means purity, but in this one, it means something a little different. What does it mean?
I think it represents peace, but it's false peace.
Well, it actually tells you what it represents here. Did you catch the word in verse 2?
He sat out at a bow.
He's conquering.
It's conquering, right? It's white is actually, this is why white is like, it's a tricky color because it has multiple meanings for you. So you really have to follow the context of it. And again, in some passages, people are, they're clothed in white because they've been purified, they're cleansed of their sins. And so that's wonderful. But in this context, the white horse is a symbol of conquest, the victor's horse. We had a reference to that in Revelation 2:17 when he's speaking to the, I think it was the church, and he says, to the one who conquers, I will give him a white stone. And we talked about that white stone is the stone of victory, the one who overcomes. And so this is now a horse coming forth bent on conquest and to conquer. And he comes with a bow. And I think we'll take a look at Isaiah 5:24-30 for that one.
Do you see any connection here with the white horse in Revelation 19?
That's a good question. The symbolism, I think, is there in that the white horse is the conquering horse who brings it all together, who carries the King of Kings. But this is not the conquering, this is a patrolling horse who is, and that horse, if you remember, that rider does not carry a bow. This one carries a bow. So it's a little different kind of scene here.
The reason I say that is because, Christ says that there'll be a day where people will claim to be Christ. It is I, right? There'll be people saying it is I.
Yeah.
And so I've heard people contrast this horse, this white horse, as a false Christ, so to speak, compared to the real deal, which is in chapter 19 of Revelation.
Yeah.
And the fulfillment of that idea where there'd be people claiming to be Christ.
Yeah, I get that. However, I have some problems with it. First is, where's this horse coming from? Who's sending the horse?
No, the Antichrist.
It's not the Antichrist sending this horse.
No, God's sending this course.
The Lord is sending this. The Lamb is the one who opens the seals, Christ himself. And it's the voice of the living creature who says, come. And it's a white horse, come to conquer. And it compares to the horses in Zechariah, which are the horses,
That's true. Yeah, that's true
rolling
too.
horses of God who are there to fulfill the Lord's purposes here. So this is let's take a look at, let's do another passage here that might maybe help bring a little more clarity to it. Hopefully it will. We'll see. This is Isaiah 5:24-30. Claudette, would you get this for us here?
Yeah,
Can you-
I'm sorry,
is that
which
enough?
verses, 25-30?
25-30. So I'll try to make it bigger and then I'll move it down about halfway when you get there.
Okay. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against his people, and he stretched out his hand against them and struck them, and the mountains quaked, and their corpses were as refuse in the midst of the streets. For all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is still stretched out. His hand is stretched out still. He will raise a signal for nations far away and whistle for them from the ends of the earth. And behold, quickly, speedily they come. None is weary, none stumbles, none slumbers or sleeps. Not a waistband is loose, not a sandal strap broken. Their arrows are sharp, all their bows are bent. Their horses' hooves seem like flint, and their wheels like the whirlwind. Their roaring is like a lion, that like young lions they roar. They growl and seize their prey. They carry it off, and none can rescue. They will growl over it on that day, like the growling of the sea. And if one looks to the land, behold, darkness and distress, and the light is darkened by its clouds.
Okay. Now here he lays out for us the way that the Lord moves with. So Israel at this time in Isaiah is in, they're about to be destroyed. I don't know if you remember who takes out the northern kingdom of Israel, which empire deals with them. Remember?
Syria.
Syrians.
The Assyrians come, right? And so the Lord's anger is kindled against his people. They're in rebellion against him. And the way that he judges them, you'll notice, is he raises a signal for the nations far away, and he whistles for them to come and conquer them. That's the idea. So the Lord, in order to punish his people of Israel, he doesn't send lightning bolts from heaven. He doesn't send fire like he did with Sodom and Gomorrah. He doesn't send a flood. He instead calls for the nations to come and conquer them. And look at how they come. They come with their horses and their bows bent, just like we saw this horse coming there. And they come like lions. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's the first living creature, the lion, who calls forth this horse, bent on conquest. This is the way the Lord brings punishment. And so remember, the church in at this time, the churches that John is writing to, do you remember which group of people was giving them a lot of trouble? And in fact, he refers to them the synagogue of Satan.
The Nicolaitans.
They're the Nicolaitans, who were the false teachers, yeah. But who was it that was persecuting them? He says they're a synagogue of Satan.
The Jews.
The Jews. I mean, so Jerusalem at this time, so God's heart is for his people, but his people are being persecuted by Jerusalem. That's the whole thing. At this time, the unbelieving Jews were the ones who were giving them the most trouble. And so when he calls for the nations, he's not just calling against a judgment against the Romans. It's against the Jews too, for the way that they have rejected his people, crucified Christ, persecuted the Christians. It was the Romans, it was the Gentiles and the Jews conspiring against him. And so at this time, particularly, we see God is calling forth once again the nations to come, to conquer, whistling for them, and they come. You can feel them coming on their horses, bursting through, wheels like the whirlwind, and with their arrows sharp and their bows bent, ready to conquer and to take out. And so that's this description of this first horse is reminiscent of the way that God dealt with Israel and the Jews in the past, when he called the Assyrians, and then he called the Babylonians to come. Well, now we see the Romans are going to be at it as well. He's going to be calling the nations, and he's going to be bringing judgment. But this judgment, we're going to find out, is not just against the Jewish people, it's against all the nations who are persecuting and troubling his people. And so let's take a look at the next part. So any question about that first horse? Are you getting kind of sense of what there's a flow to these horses. There's a natural progression. Each one kind of builds upon the next. So before we move to the next one, any questions or thoughts on that first one? Okay.
Well, are you saying that Jesus is not on that first white horse?
No, he's the lamb.
He's the lamb, okay.
He opens the seals.
Yeah, but don't stay with the scene here, at least in this vision. Now, there are other scenes where Jesus will be the one on the horse,
Okay,
but not in this scene. This scene, it's very clear. He's the lamb who opens the seal.
gotcha.
And then the lion, the four living creatures, is the one who calls. And then this horse appears with a rider and a bow. And he's given a crown. That means he's representative of kingdoms and authorities. and he goes out conquering and to conquer. And so again, this is not a literal horse.
Right.
It's the vision. And basically the idea is there is now, Jesus even told it, he says, as he's giving them, there'll be wars and rumors of wars. You remember that phrase?
Yep.
There'll be wars and rumors of wars. And so the first measure of God's stirring, that he's moving, is the peace that people were feeling is gone. And now, especially in the Roman Empire at that time, there was the Pax Romana, if you remember, the peace of Rome.
Mm.
The longest time they were completely at peace.
10 years of peace.
Yeah, until you get toward the end, toward around the 60s, you start having wars and troubles in that first century, and nations are rising up against nations. And the Jewish-Roman War begins around 67 AD. And then you have Nero, and it just becomes chaos, and just it becomes a nightmare.
I've
But
got,
you-
I've got a note on in my Bible that on a white horse was the Antichrist.
Yeah, I don't agree. I
No.
don't agree with that. You know, I mean, I don't think we're jumping ahead. I think if you read it in its context, we'll get to the beast. We'll get to that whole thing. But I don't think this is a reference to that.
No,
Personally. I mean, there are different interpretations, but yeah. Yeah. So this is really tricky, Revelation, because there are so many schools of thought on this and so many ways to interpret it. And I'm really trying to stick with the context here and with the references to the Old Testament that are called out. And I think when we look at Zechariah, these are patrolling horses that are being sent to see how the earth is going, and then to bring forth, to really start the process of God's judgments here. Let's look at the second living creature, verses 3 and 4. And Jack, you up for reading?
Sure. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword.
Okay. All right. So now we have the second seal opened. And this time it's the second living creature that speaks. And who is the second living creature?
Ox.
The ox. Do you have any idea why the ox would be the one to call forth this horse? And this horse, we find out, is what color?
Red.
Red.
Bright red. Emphasize. There's a difference, because the horse in Zechariah, the reddish color is not a bright red. It's a different. This one he emphasizes a bright red. Why emphasize bright red? What's that a color of?
Blood.
That's blood. That's the color of blood. And why the ox, which is really interesting. The ox as a creature, one thing is it is the one creature that is slaughtered through the sacrifices. They would be sacrificing oxen. It was typical, so that it would be sort of fitting that the lion, who is the conquering beast, would call forth the first horse, and the ox, which is the slaughtered animal, is the one who calls forth the next horse, which is the one who will take peace from the earth and cause people to slay one another. So now God's enemies are fighting each other. So before this happens, you have the enemies of God's people are sort of at peace. Remember at the crucifixion, it says that Herod and Pontius Pilate became friends. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right, who was Herod and who was Pontius Pilate?
Well, there were officials of the Roman government.
Yeah, Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor, and who was Herod?
It was the
He was
patriarch.
he was the king of the Jews. So you have the ruling authorities of the Jews and the Romans conspiring together, becoming friends over the blood of Christ, being that they conspired to shed. And the Jews and the Gentiles conspired against them. So the enemies of Christ are sort of at peace, but now the Lord comes and turns them against one another, so that they should slay one another. And that's exactly what you see in the Jewish and Roman war, just a brutal period of time where the bloodshed was insane, especially what happened to the Jews by the Romans. But many Romans perished too. It was just a horrifying time as they turned against one another. And so the enemies of God's people now are turned against one another and slaying each other. And this rider of the bright red horse, he's given a great sword. All right, that's a reference to something. Let's take a look at Isaiah 27, how that goes here. Okay. Let's see. Bob Gerges, would you read that just one verse for us here, 27:1?
Which one? Revelation.
Isaiah 27, verse 1.
Isaiah
Oh,
27.
You
I
got
don't-
that?
It's
Yeah, I
on the
don't-
screen. It's on the screen, honey.
Can you see it on the screen?
yeah, no, it's something happened and I am on the Zoom.
Okay.
screen.
All right, no worries. No worries. I can,
Mine if you want.
Yeah, yeah.
sure. You want to look at that real quick?
In that day, the Lord with his sword and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, and Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea.
Okay. Now, there are different swords given in the Bible. There is the double-edged sword, which is, what is that a reference to? The sharp double-edged sword.
Usually that's a word, isn't it?
Word, the
That's
word.
the word of God, right? That just the word of God. But this is not that particular sword. This is a great sword and a great and strong sword. What's the purpose of this sword?
To slaughter, to
Slay the
kill.
dragon.
Just
Yeah, it is to punish and to slay the dragon here, this twisting serpent. Leviathan, this representative. Leviathan is sometimes a reference to Egypt, basically to any of the great powers that were oppressing. It goes back to the serpent in the garden and the forces of darkness that are laid against God's people, and that they come from the sea, this place of evil and so forth. But we're going to find later on, if you remember, the beast that comes out of the sea, that's going to be tormenting God's people. But here, this great sword is given to him, and that specific great sword is designed to punish the evildoers, to punish these oppressing nations and forces that are aligned against God's people. So again, the first two scenes are not scenes of terror for the believer. It's their hope. The cavalry is coming, basically, is the idea. Here, this first one coming to bring, it brings this calls for the nations to, in a sense, to conquer one another, so to speak, and then to fight and to slay each other. It's, I don't know. Do you guys like Godzilla movies?
No.
These, right? So a classic Godzilla scene is that Godzilla is not really the villain. He's just a monster. And sometimes the best ones are where he has to fight another monster, right? So there's some other monster that's tormenting Earth, and Godzilla comes in and fights him. And there's a great phrase, "Let them fight." And everyone's just watching these two monsters fight each other. And that's great, because before it was just one monster destroying everybody. Now at least they're fighting each other, and they're, in a sense, we have a little break from them and maybe a hope that they might kill each other. It's sort of the scene here. It's sort of this sword comes, and the way that God wields it is that he takes peace from the earth, so that now his enemies are suspicious of one another, and they begin to, their alliances are broken, and they begin to fight one another and slaughter each other. Didn't he do this one time? Was it in the book of Judges? Who was the judge that, was it Gideon? Remember the Midianites were, and where there was just millions of soldiers in the valleys. And then with 300 men, Gideon, smashes the jars, blows the trumpets, and the people are thrown into confusion, and they fight each other and they kill each other. These allies get so confused, they kill each other. It's a classic technique of God to do this. So, all right, that's the second seal. So we have the first one, this calling the nations together for conquest, and then taking peace from the earth, so that now there's this great battle and slaughter, and the blood begins to flow. There's your red horse. All right. And you also have that phrase I referenced in Matthew 10, where Jesus says, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth, but I came to bring a sword. Do you remember that in Matthew 10?
Never understood that. No.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at that one here, what he says by that. Matthew 10, 34, 39.
You gotta make a choice.
Matthew, what?
Matthew 10, 34 to 39. Teresa, would you read that for us? Can you see it?
10. Do not think I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves the father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves the son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake will find it.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question. How was this word? He says, you don't think that I've come to bring peace to this earth here. I'm bringing a sword, at least first. And he tells exactly what that means, to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother. What does that mean? What does he mean by that? That their enemies will be their own household?
If you've got a believer and a non-believer, there's gonna be controversy.
Mm.
You know,
How
I don't
many-
know, I don't know many other families, but I see it in my family and I know a few others the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, how many of you have experienced this where your coming to faith actually did not bring you friends, but actually made some friends, maybe even enemies or strangers to you? That people who were formerly close to you, but when you came to faith in Christ, they really kind of turned against you or abandoned you in some way. And that's still fairly common today. It's not as common in America because we're still kind of a basically Christian nation. It's not that offensive for you to be a Christian, but think about this. If you're a Muslim and you become a Christian and get baptized, what will happen to you?
To be ostracized.
Are killed.
You at best, you will be disowned. At
Well,
worst, you will be killed.
look at the early Christians and the Jews.
Yeah. That's exactly what he's talking about. He says, don't think that I'm come and you're going to have peace with everybody on earth now. You're not. I'm not calling you to war. I'm just giving you the reality that now there's going to be divisions in families and you have to make a choice. Are you going to love your father or mother who hate me and insist that you reject
Yeah.
me? Or are you going to follow me and lose your family? That's the choice that many of you are going to have to make that choice. Not everybody has to make that choice, but many will and have to determine who's more important. And so that's the way he speaks of it. It's a shocking statement. It's designed to be that way. But it's a very important truth to get, that following Christ comes at a cost. And one of the costs is we may very well lose our families because of it. And so if we love our family, even our children, more than Christ, and abandon the faith it's because we want to have peace with them, you know, can't have it both. So that's the idea. So
Pastor, what does take up his cross mean and follow me?
yeah. So what is the cross? What is a cross? What did they understand a cross was?
The tribulation or
Persecution?
Shame.
It's a symbol. The cross is a symbol of shame, rejection. It's a symbol of death. But basically, it's a symbol of basically all the full rejection of this world following Christ. You cannot follow Christ and have the world. You can't have it both. And so to follow Christ means we take up a cross and follow him. And the picture of the cross, you're carrying your cross, right? And what are the crowds doing as you're carrying a cross? Are they cheering you as you're carrying your
No.
cross? They say, way to go, keep carrying that cross, right? They're mocking you. They're deriding you. That's the picture. You see Christ on the cross, going to Calvary, carrying the cross and the shame of it, and the hatred of the crowds and the rejection of everybody. And he says, that's the path you have to follow with me, and bear that shame, bear the rejection, bear the humiliation of it. Some of you, not all of you, and maybe not even many of you comparatively, will have to die for the faith, but we all will have to face the rejection of it. And we follow in this parade. Yeah.
I felt a little bit of that, what you were saying. When I was 16 I don't know if anybody remembers Jack Warson's Word of Life camp. I was sent there by my aunt and my cousin. And I met some girl, and we were having a great time, and we're sitting, and then we got preached to, and I went forward. But if it stays in my mind even today, she started hollering at me with every step I took towards this fire. We gathered around a fire. I went forward for Jesus, and never talked to me again, the girl.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is when because Jesus says, don't be surprised if the world hates you, because they hate me. They're in rebellion. And when the world is in rebellion to Christ, and he is the enemy, and so when you align yourself with the enemy, what are you then? When you're a traitor to the world. We have betrayed the world in following Christ. That's why there's such a fury for it. You know, you have a certain hatred for enemies, but a far greater hatred for traitors. You know, because they've gone to you were on their side. You were one of them, and now you're not. How could you? How could you? Right. All right. Let's take a look at the third seal. Where do we leave off here? And Nancy, would you get this for us? 5 and 6.
Yes. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine."
Okay, this is a little trickier one to understand. Some of it's clear, but parts of it are a little bit hazy of what exactly they mean. So this is the third. Who's the third living creature now?
Man,
That's the man.
That's
Okay.
man.
All right, that's the man, and he calls now he calls forth a black horse. And what does the black horse? I don't know if you know what the color of black in this context is about. What's this section referring to? What's about to happen now after the people have been fighting? This is famine, yeah. And black is the color of famine. In Lamentations, it talks about that, how, you know, before we were white and ruddy and healthy looking, and now we're suffering in our you know, when you starve, your skin gets darker and darker as you kind of shrink and shrivel. And so that black is a sort of a picture of this famine and anguish. It's also the picture of great sorrow, a black of it's like sackcloth and ashes, and of like a funeral almost. But it's just this. In this context, it is this picture of famine that always accompanies wars. You'll notice that. And in this context, you know, it's a famine. He says a quart of wheat for a denarius. What's a denarius?
It was a
1
Roman
day's wage.
coin.
Yeah, it's a Roman coin. It's a day's wage for a worker. So when you think about that, a worker today, what does a worker make? About, let's say a low income worker who's getting like $15 an hour minimum wage. So what's that? About $100 or so, $120.
Yeah.
So can you imagine paying $120 for a quart of wheat?
Wow.
That's how scarce it is. Or 3 quarts of barley.
Is this passage calling against injustice of man against man? In other words, the scales or the scales
Yeah.
of justice.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it's actually not in this case. It's the rider is holding a pair of scales, which in this context, you're right, there are the scales of justice. But in this context, the scales are used for what?
Paying the food.
To weigh the food and to
Mm.
weigh the measurement. It's used in the economy. And so it's now he's talking about this is what's going to happen now to the economy, because this is what happens in wartime. You have destruction of fields and
But then the do not harm the oil and wine. It just,
yeah. That's an unclear meaning of that. It's possible. They say that like in certain times of war, the oil and the wine, because they are owned by wealthier people, are more not vulnerable to the battles that would happen. There's some that say that. I'm not exactly sure. Does someone have any commentary on that? Maybe historical commentary on what that might mean?
I thought I read someplace that it had to do with the nutrition value in it. It's or individual products go into so many different foods.
Yeah.
When making them.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't have those, you would almost be unable to create any kind of meals.
Yeah. So but I want to stress a couple things with this, but you get a sense, whatever it means, there is a sense of restraint in this scene here of the famine. It's not going to be the end of the world here. This is a classic famine, and it seems to be limited to the wheat and the barley. It doesn't seem to be affecting the oil and wine for some reason. But the idea, yeah, go ahead.
I've got a note in my end that says, do not damage the olive and the vine, are to be used more sparingly in time of famine. It's something
Okay.
that would be used sparingly anyways.
Okay. Yeah. Again, it's what is exactly the meaning of it? Not sure. But the context is clearly that this is bringing forth the next phase of God's actions, which is bringing suffering through famine to these rebellious nations he's turning them against each other. And now the next phase, this black horse is coming and bringing famine to them, which brings us to our fourth living creature. And this is an interesting one here. 7. John, would you read that for us? 7 and 8.
When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth.
Yeah. All right. He opens the fourth seal. Who's the fourth living creature?
The eagle.
The eagle.
Eagle. Now, I'm going back to that third living creature. I'm not exactly sure why the man is for that one, but I think I know why the eagle is for this one. What's besides being the king of the birds, the eagle is oftentimes
He's a scavenger.
it's a scavenger, isn't it?
Yeah.
The
That's
eagle.
a wonderful vision.
He's fearless.
Yeah, you see with the eagles, they say, in fact, Jesus even says that where you see the eagles, there the body is basically they're the cleanup crew here as they're bringing the rest of the final destruction of everybody. And the bodies in the field and the eagles and the vultures are all kind of circling around is the scene. And he sees a pale horse. And the pale horse is representative of what?
Anguish.
Death.
Yeah. Pale is the color of this anguish, pale in face, but in this context, along with that anguish of death, and Hades followed him. What's death and Hades about? We saw them before, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Revelation 1:18, I think, referenced death. I have the keys of death and Hades. What is Hades?
Oh,
The abode of the dead, Sheol.
place of the dead.
Separation
So,
separation from God.
Yeah, Hades is not, it's not the eternal fire of hell. Hades is the realm of the dead, the place of the dead. So, you know, the psalmist will say, you will not leave my soul in Hades. So it's just the place of the dead, the realm where they go. It's not a reference to whether they are being judged for good or evil, but just that they are died and they are buried. And so that's why that's why the word hell gets really tricky, because we sometimes, hell can refer to the eternal fire of hell. It can also refer to Hades, the place of the dead. And so some, for example, in the Apostles' Creed, in some of the references, they say that Jesus descended into hell, or that he descended to the dead, or he descended to Hades. We kind of leave it out of ours simply because it's just confusing for people. It's not saying that he went to hell and was suffered there, but that he went to the place of the dead. Death in Hades.
Yeah, it
follows.
was supposed to be,
Would that be like purgatory, in the Catholic religion?
That's a good question. I don't think it's the same. I think Hades is a general term of basically anyone who's not with us. In a sense, they're in Hades. They're in the place of the dead, whatever that might be. Purgatory, according to the Catholic religion, as I understand it, is specifically for Christians who have not yet attained heaven, and so they
Right.
are sent to Hades, sent to purgatory. But I think
It's like a halfway house.
yeah.
Michael,
Mhm.
with that, if a person dies and they're not in Christ, after the rapture and the judgment seat, will Jesus at that point be opening the gates of hell? In other words, it's not really open yet, is?
So when
know
we
what I
get
mean?
when we get to Revelation, you see that there is this resurrection of the dead, the righteous
Right.
and the unrighteous.
Uh-huh.
And those that are, there is this eternal state of damnation for the resurrected who are damned, who are the unrighteous.
Uh-huh.
There is a spiritual state. It seems like in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, it says the rich man goes and he's in a place of torment.
Torment, yeah.
In spiritually. So you get a sense that, and again, it's all of it is a sense, because it's not,
Right.
it's hard to clearly
not
lay out
clear.
anything. But
Yeah.
that when we die, our spirits, Jesus says, for those who belong to the Lord, we are with the Lord in
Right.
paradise, and we're waiting for the resurrection. It's a
Right.
rest and of peace. For those who are not in the Lord, their spirits go to a place that is not of rest, of
Right.
pleasure
It's
of
torment.
torment. And they're also waiting resurrection. So in a sense, we go to a waiting room, put it this way, like the hors d'oeuvre room outside of a great banquet hall.
Uh-huh.
It's an enjoyable place.
Yes.
But we're waiting for the big feast. They go to the pre-trial conference room awaiting their final verdict, which is a fearful place. You see, so it's still a waiting place, but a different kind of waiting. Maybe that makes sense?
Yes, yeah.
I'm throwing stuff out here. If it,
And in the Old Testament, they call this place Sheol.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I thought to be absent from the body was to be present with the Lord in the twinkling of an eye. So
Yeah,
where does
yeah.
all this come in with that?
Well,
That's spirit.
true. Absent from the body, spiritually speaking, our spirits will be with the Lord,
Yes.
but our bodies will be in the ground.
Right.
And we are waiting for Christ to return, when our bodies will rise and we will have resurrected bodies, reunited with our spirits to dwell in the new heavens and new earth. That's the ultimate hope. So what we have a hope in that when we die, it is true, we will be in a better place, but it won't be the best place. The best place is coming when Christ returns with a
I have
new
a
heavens and
question.
new earth. Yeah.
I have a question, Pastor. This is something that I always wonder. it's supposed that we are not going to have suffering or we're going to be happy when we are in
Yeah.
heaven.
Yeah.
But what if we realize that one loved one, or that we thought was going to be there, is
Yeah.
not? We're going to be aware of that, or no? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just I
Yeah.
always thinking.
That's a
what
great question. I would put it this way. Did you ever watch a movie where at the beginning of the movie you're rooting for a character? You think that this is a great character, a great guy, and you think the world of him. And then as the story develops, you realize, there's things about him that I didn't realize at first, and things are made more clear, and you have a better perspective at the end of the movie, and you know what the true happy ending is and what really makes a difference. The challenge we have right now is that we don't have a proper perspective of everything. We don't see the big picture. And so if I were to tell you at the beginning of that movie that Joe is going to die and you're going to be happy about it, you would be shocked. He's such a good guy. But you didn't realize that Joe later on was cheating and stealing and raping people and killing and conspiring. All that came out later. So for right now, we don't understand everything. We don't know who's who. We don't understand who's what. At that day, everything is made clear. And so one thing I do know is there will be no sorrow in heaven. There'll be no frustration. We will see things clearly, and it will be a place of pure joy. And so even if there are people that we love on this earth right now dearly, and we should love them and pray for them, you don't have to be afraid that if they don't make it, you're going to be miserable. You never have to be afraid of that. We will be reunited with our true family. And it will have a totally different perspective on everything at that time.
Isn't there also a point where it says that in the beginning there will be sorrow, but that will be basically erased?
Yeah, every tear will be wiped from our eyes. That's what we're told.
Yeah.
Every tear will be wiped from our eyes. So there'll be you don't have to fret that people that you dearly love, that their absence is going to make things worse and horrible for you or for anyone there. We'll see things clearly. And again, I don't, right now we plead and we grieve and we pray, and we should, and we love them, absolutely. But in that day, you don't have to be afraid that, oh, I'm the only one in my family that made it. I'm going to be so lonely. Everyone's going to be celebrating with their families. I'm going to be in a corner, right? No one's at my table. No, we're going to see our true family for the first time. And you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed at people that you had no idea who these people were. And you will find a bond to them closer than any blood relative you've ever had in this life, because that's your true family. And we're waiting for that. That whole story of the ugly duckling is a fitting one. You know that story, right? The ugly duckling, right? Rejected, his family, he's having trouble. He's trying to get along with his family, longing for them, and only to realize that's not his family. That's not his family. His family's out in the water. They're waiting for him, looking for him. And only then is he really happy. And that's the same thing for us. It's like our family here, as much as we care about them, may or may not be our true family. Some of them will be, but not all of them.
But if they're not there, they didn't have Christ in their heart, didn't make that decision.
Yeah. So things will be clear. Things will be clear. And we don't have to worry about that it will dampen our experience in any way. I hope that's helpful. It's hard to talk about because you can't imagine seeing your loved ones in hell and thinking being fine with that.
Glad there won't
somehow it works. Somehow it works.
We're glad there won't be any marriages there.
No marriages, right?
It's interesting when you say that, because I want to see my Savior, but then I'm going to say I want to see Ammon. Because in my mind, I'm still married to him. He was very much part of my life for 47 years. In fact, Michael, your mom believes the same thing too. She wants to see a savior that she wants to see emo.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would love to see loved ones ahead of me too. But again, I think we're going to see things differently when we get there. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, think about this. Here's an analogy for you. Imagine when you were a child, right?
Yeah.
And the things that captivated you as a little child and how they hold no interest for you whatsoever. I know for me, it's like, I couldn't, my mom never let us eat sugar cereals like Frosted Flakes or Fruit Loops. And I obsessed over these things. I thought there was nothing better possibly than these sugar cereals, right? Because it's just how great it is to wake up and have dessert for breakfast. How great is that?
Yeah.
Only to realize I couldn't imagine that there would come a day when these same things that I loved would disgust me. And my whole appetite would be different.
Yeah.
And I think in heaven, we will have completely different appetites, and the things that we think we'll want to do and see we may have absolutely no interest in. And there are things that we can't imagine that will be the greatest source of delight for us. And, it's hard to talk about because we're talking about unseen realms that we have no access to right now.
Is there any truth to the rumor that you eat Captain Crunch now, Pastor?
We never let my son eat it. And then my brother got him a box of Captain Crunch for one of our vacations, and he devoured that thing. So, all right. So I just want to wrap it up real quick because we're closing out. But that fourth seal, death and Hades follow him. And I just want to make one last point about it. It says they were given authority over a fourth of the earth. And that number 4, if you remember, is the number of the earth. But the fourth of it really shows that this is a partial movement. This is just a down payment on what's to come. This is not the full judgment. This is just a fourth. And you're going to see all the ravages of war, the sword, famine, pestilence, and wild beasts. And these are the covenant punishments that are given in the books of the law and that Ezekiel references. You can look it up yourself. Ezekiel 5 references these 4 elements that come with this. So this scene, and again, I want to stress it, is a hopeful scene. It's full of joy for the believer who is like John, who's rotting in prison, who are suffering, who are meeting, the church is meeting in catacombs, in the graves, underground. They can't peek their head out. And now there's hope because God is moving. And his first movement is calling the nations to begin this battle against one another and to bring about, there's going to be this famine. They're going to start suffering, and they're not going to be so focused on persecuting Christians anymore because they're trying to find stuff to eat right now. And then there's going to be death and Hades coming. And this is all part of God's plan of rescuing his people from their distress, coming with clouds, riding the cherubim with his bow and arrows, coming to deliver us. And that's why it really is not to be interpreted as this terrifying scene for the Christian. It's a hopeful scene. Again, the cavalry is coming. That's what it's saying, basically. The cavalry is coming for us. So that's where we begin. And then when we get to next week with the 5th seal, we'll see exactly the question that will set the tone for the rest of the book as well. All right, I think we're good with that.
Yeah.
It's helpful. So let me close it out here.